This edition of MacVoices is supported by you, our viewers and listeners, through our new Patreon campaign. If you get value from MacVoices, please consider helping support the show by visiting patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is a talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, I'm always happy to welcome someone new to the podcasting game, although these gentlemen really are not new to it. But they have a new podcast. I'm especially excited about it. They've gone through all the process of getting everything set up, and now they have their first episode out, and we get to talk to them just as they're announcing that first episode. So first up, Mr. Jeff Carlson. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you for having me here.
Hey, it's a pleasure. And his partner in podcasting, Mr. Kirk McElhearn. Kirk, welcome.
Nice to be back, Chuck.
It's great to have you back, both of you back, to sort of, well, you're going to announce it, but to talk a little bit about your brand new podcast, PhotoActive. And I have to admit, I have a bone to pick with both of you right out of the gate, because I want to know why you didn't do this sooner, because this sounds like the perfect podcast for me, and I really appreciate that. So
go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah.
Well, it was a question of timing. Jeff and I have been both interested in photography for a long time, and I'm particularly interested in using photography without going through all the hassles of complicated apps, and the Apple ecosystem is great for that. So the tagline to the podcast is a podcast about photography and the Apple ecosystem. And that doesn't mean we're just going to talk about the iPhone. We're going to talk about real cameras, even though the iPhone is a real camera. But we're going to talk about using apps on iOS, using apps on the Mac, using the iPhone, using the options that we have today in modern photography. You know, everyone has a camera in their pocket, or almost everyone. And lots of people take pictures. And looking around, I saw that no one was really focusing on an Apple-oriented photography podcast. So it seemed like a niche to fill in.
Well, and it's also the audience of people who are using Apple products, like not just iPhone users, but people who have Macs, who have iPhones and iPads, and the Photos app is where they're putting everything. There's basically a giant number of people, a giant market. I don't want to sound like a marketer, but a giant number of people who enjoy taking photos and don't necessarily know what to do with them, or they've just maybe dipped their toe into maybe editing, and what we want to address is that big middle ground of people who like taking photos. They want to make their photos better. They may know how to do it, but may not. And the people who, like basically ordinary people who don't necessarily see themselves as photographers who necessarily need to be experts at Photoshop or experts in Lightroom, or be able to manipulate layers. And as you know, with photography, it can get very complicated very quickly, and there's that barrier of thinking, okay, this is just too overwhelming, I'm not going to deal with it, or I'm going to push it off till later. And so what we want to speak to is that essence of people who like really enjoy photography and aren't experts, and that's fine. Does that make sense?
You don't have to be great at the technology side of photography to take interesting pictures. And your pictures don't have to be great. They can be pictures of your vacation. They can be pictures of your kids or of your cats. And I do a lot of cat photos. But what's important is that you make photos that you like and that you eventually want to share with people, and that you learn how to make your photos a little bit better. You learn different ways to take photos, different ways to work with them. There's an interesting complementarity between Jeff and I. He's written books about Lightroom, which is one of these elements of the Adobe industrial complex. And it's way too complicated for me. I do almost all of my photo editing in Apple Photos. I'm more interested in taking the photo than I am in post-processing photos. And I do stuff. I edit photos a little bit, but not that much. And Jeff knows all this stuff about Lightroom, and I'm going to learn all this stuff from him, but I'm not going to use Lightroom anyway. But we can also show people that you can just use the Photos app. I was talking to someone earlier today. I was recording another podcast, and we were on Skype doing a video like this. And I said, hey, I want you to check out my new podcast. You might like it. And the guy said, oh, yeah, I take pictures with my iPhone, and I want to know how to make them better. I said, you know what? This is for you. So I sent him to the page we have of the first episode, and there's an example of a photo that my partner's brother took in Venice. And he was over here one day, and he was showing me his photos, and I said, you know what? I can show you how to make this better. And in less than 60 seconds, in Photos, I took a photo that was crooked and dark, and I cropped it, and I raised the color and the contrast, and it looks like a really decent photo. And this guy I was talking to today was like, he saw that, and he's like, really? You can do that in less than 60 seconds? And I said, subscribe.
I mean, that's... Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, no, before we get away from that, that was one of the points that I wanted to make. I listened to the first episode, and we're not going to obviously rehash the first episode, but there were two real big takeaways. And Kirk, that was one of them, that you tend to work in Photos, that Jeff tends to work in Lightroom, and so you'll be approaching it, but it's all part of the Apple ecosystem. And that's why I said this is the show for me. I listened to a couple photography-related podcasts, and I, honestly, probably about 50% of what they say is wasted on me because I'm not that far along. I'm learning, and I'd always rather listen above me than below. But at the same time, they're talking about things that really aren't necessarily part of the Apple ecosystem. And that's what makes me so excited about this particular show, because I know every time that it pops up in my downloads list, it's going to have something that I can use. Exactly.
I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging anyone, but when you come up with the idea of, hey, let's do a photo podcast, you go and you listen to a bunch of other ones, and there are a surprising number of how to say this well. There are a lot of podcasts out there that are either very specifically oriented toward, more advanced users. There are also a lot of podcasts out there that are just, let's sit around for an hour and a half or 2 hours and talk about what we did over the weekend, and then talk about like lenses and gear and bags. And, there's definitely a place for that. However, we came to this independently when we got together and started talking about this. We both have this idea that our podcast doesn't have to be like that. Our podcast, we want to keep it to 30 minutes or less because we don't want to waste anybody's time. I'm sure Kirk and I have very interesting weekends. We will probably never talk about them unless it, specifically relates to something photographic or the topic of the day. We'll be very, very focused on what we're talking about because, we don't want to waste anybody's time. But we also realize that, we want to encourage you to go out and shoot and think about photography and, think about how you're managing your photos and keep all of that top of mind rather than just sort of like, oh, hey, here's, two middle-aged guys talking about whatever.
Well, we got the two middle-aged guys part.
Yeah. But you're going to get that anyway.
Another
That's
point,
the bonus.
to just amplify something that Jeff said, neither of us are particularly gear obsessive. And this is something that's really big in photography. In fact, you buy photography magazines, it's about 25% gear, 50% things you can do and places you can go, and then another 25% gear. So neither of us really care that much about gear. We both coincidentally use Fujifilm cameras, and we both came at them independently. I'm in a situation where I have two cameras now, and I might buy another lens, but I'm okay. I don't really need more stuff. I'm more interested in learning how to take pictures. I'm more interested in learning how to see. I'm not really that worried about having an f1.2 50-millimeter lens instead of an f1.8. And, the glorious, I won't say the word background blur, that word that people use for background blur that's all creamy and dreamy.
It's going to come
And the
up.
problem with gear is that then you exclude people who don't use your brand or brands of camera. So if we were only talking about Fujifilm cameras, we'd probably get an audience of people who use Fujifilm cameras. But we don't want to limit it to that. And in particular, because we both write about Apple stuff and we both use iPhones and we write about that. And it seems to me that, you know, you've got this really good camera in your iPhone. You can take pictures that are good enough with your iPhone. You don't need an expensive, fancy camera. So we'll talk about a little bit of gear. We've got a topic list of about 50 ideas. And there's one where we're going to talk about different types of lenses, like prime lenses versus zoom lenses. And maybe we'll talk once about the kind of lens that clips on an iPhone. But the majority of the podcast is not going to be about gear. You've got a camera. You don't need another camera.
The other thing that I took away from the first episode, and I've known you two gentlemen for quite some time now, and I think of you as experts in your respective fields, and that's tech, but also photography. You come at it from different angles, but I think of you as, you know, these people that were born with cameras in their hands. And I had found out in the first episode that really kind of neither of you are. Kirk may have a little bit on Jeff, but you both kind of came to this whole game late, and that means there's hope for me, which I was really happy to find out too. So is photography that much of a passion, or was this just something you saw a niche that could be filled and decided to fill it? Jeff?
Yes.
Kirk?
Next. No, it's
Yes.
So my story in brief. We cover this in the episode because it's really our introductory episode. But you know, I did not use cameras much when I was younger. I've basically come up with the digital photography line of photography, which has been great because you know, I've not had to, you know, deal with some of the limitations of film, for example. You know, I'm used to being able to shoot a lot of photos and not worry about, you know, how expensive it's going to be to process them and all that. But what happened was I went on vacation to Africa, and my wife and I had this great opportunity to go there, and that meant we were going to go on safari, like real safari, not go to the zoo, but go on safari. And so I thought, okay, my little dinky point and shoot digital camera isn't going to be good enough if I'm going to actually go on safari. So I bought this Canon Super Zoom, which is basically like it's an all-in-one, but it's got a really good zoom on it. And it was like a great first camera, and it helped me, you know, start thinking and seeing as a photographer, and then I was hooked. And I made a few nice pictures, and so it basically became this wonderful hobby. And I tell this story too often for my wife to really like it, but like when I did start doing that, my wife was very happy because I had a hobby finally, rather than you know, being a freelance writer and a Mac technologist, and, you know, sort of being all consumed by all that. And so, you know, I had this hobby now, and that was great. And then one of my editors at Peachpit Press, they were like, "Hey, you're taking some nice photos. Do you want to write a book about?" I think it was about like a book about a specific camera model. And being a freelance writer, I was like, "Why, yes, I would be happy to write about this new thing that I'm passionate about, and you're going to pay me for." And so photography then sort of became equally hobby and also profession, and I've, you know, gone way deep into that, where, you know, now like a lot of what I write about is photography related. So the answer, I started with a very short answer. It became a very long answer, but basically, yes, it's something that is a hobby. It's something that I enjoy doing. I really enjoy writing about it, and I enjoy the fact that it helps me see things differently. It helps me, go to New York City, where I was last week, and be able to like look at the environment with a different set of eyes, rather than just like, oh my God, there's so many people. And that I don't know, it triggers some sort of creative bit in my brain that I like to share.
Yeah, that sounds like so many things we've heard from videographers and programmers and all kind of endeavors where you have to learn to think like whatever that particular discipline is. That's one of the most important aspects of it. And Kirk, it sounds like you were maybe already doing that at a little bit earlier age, but in a different kind of way.
Yeah, I first did a photography shop class in high school. I think it was a junior in high school. Black and white cameras, enlargers, darkroom. And I just did that for one term, and it was really interesting. And then in the early 80s, I bought a film camera. And for a few years, I was taking a lot of pictures. I didn't have my own darkroom, but I went to a place where you could rent by the hour. And, well, then I left New York, and I hitchhiked around France for a year, and I didn't have a camera. And so I just ignored photography, other than getting a decent point-and-shoot film camera when my son was growing up. To document that. And then around 2002, 2003, I was living in the French Alps, and I was writing a book about Mac OS X, and there was a chapter on iPhotos. So I went out and I bought a 1 megapixel HP digital camera, which I guess must have cost $150 at the time. This is when they were probably up to 3 or 5 megapixel were the good ones, so the 1 megapixel were cheap. And I did that for a while, and I didn't do much. And then it's really about 5 years ago when I came to the UK, I said, you know what? I'm going to get a real camera, and I'm going to start taking more pictures. And that was kind of, for me, the tipping point, when all of a sudden, all these years of appreciating photography as an art form, going to museums, and painting and sculpture and all of the creative arts, we've gotten to the point digitally where the quality of digital cameras is so good. My cameras are both 24 megapixels. Now, that's twice as much as an iPhone, and an iPhone's already pretty good. So we're at the point where technically you don't have to worry anymore. You don't need better. You don't need 100 megapixels, though I kind of would like to get a Leica one day, but that's another story. And what Jeff says about seeing the world differently is part of what interests me. I have quite a large collection of photo books. In fact, I recently had to buy a new bookcase to put my photo book collection because they're really heavy. And I like looking at photo books and seeing how a photographer has examined the world. I always think of photography as a photograph is light and shape and color, and it's the four corners of the frame that the photographer chooses. And when you look at a photograph by an excellent photographer, I've got a picture up here by Todd Heido on the wall, which is this sort of long exposure evening picture of a suburban house in the snow and the light coming out of the windows. It's really haunting. And sometimes if I'm walking down the street, I'll see a house and it'll make me think, you know what, that's kind of like that. Or Jeff had an occasion to see 10 minutes of an exhibit in New York of a photographer I love called William Eggleston. His photographs they're not the easiest to appreciate, but once you do appreciate his style, you start seeing the world the way he does, the framing, the composition, the subjects that he uses. And that to me, when I go out and walk around where I live and when I travel, that to me is interesting, that I can take a camera and I can kind of document those things. The fact that it's digital means that you take as many pictures as you want. You delete all the ones that are bad. Sturgeon's law, 90% of everything is crap or whatever. But you have this technical ability to do all this. And photography is something that anyone can do. You give someone a camera, they point, they take a picture. You give a little kid a camera, and they'll take pictures. But there's a whole lifetime of refinement that you can do to this as well. And just to riff on something Jeff said earlier, he bought a good camera because he was going on a big trip. And a lot of people do that. They're going on a cruise, they're going on a trip to some country, and they get this camera and they want to take all the pictures. And then they put the camera away. So in a way, our podcast should be for those people, for them to keep using that camera when they get back home, because it's nice to take photos of exotic locations, but you can also take great photos right around the corner.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's something I'm trying to learn. And I'm trying to learn to think like a photographer. I'm also trying to remember to take some of those photos. But you look at really interesting images online, on Instagram or Facebook or wherever people have taken them, and you suddenly realize that sometimes those locations are not exotic. They're literally in somebody's backyard or just down the street. And it's like, gee, why can't I live there? And then you look around and think, hey, maybe I do. I just am not seeing it. And so I'm looking forward to learning so much from you two.
Well,
one of the
that
things
right there.
we hope it.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things we want to cover in the show is not just editing, managing photos, but also where to find, how to see. And I will talk about photographers and photo books a lot, because for me, this is a huge inspiration. So yes, we hope that we can get people. One of the ideas that Jeff came up with when we were talking about this early is to have photo challenges. And this is not an uncommon thing. You say to people, this month, take a photo of happiness, take a photo of cold or something. And it'll be interesting to try to inspire people to get outside their comfort zone. And happiness isn't just a kid smiling. It could be, when you've got a vine like a wisteria, and at the end of the vine, it has a little spiral. And if you catch it with a drop of dew in the sunlight, there's all these things. I say this because I've got a wisteria out the window. It's really a magnificent plant. But there's all these things you can capture if you just open your eyes and look at them.
Well, so related to that, I think one of the things that came up in our first episode, and I'm sure is going to be a recurring theme, is just that aspect of how do you find photos in stuff that you are very familiar with already? Because it is great to be able to go to some like fantastic landscape location, get there for sunset. Hopefully, if the light and the clouds and everything works, you'll get a nice dramatic scene, and you can take pictures of it. And that's great. There's a lot of satisfaction to that. But also a lot of
until
that.
You look on Instagram and see 150 other people have taken the exact same scene.
Well, see, exactly, because like you have this destination. And yes, a lot of other people have taken that picture. And what I find interesting is, okay, you're there. And then this comes up in like photo workshops that I lead. Sometimes people expect that, we're going to go to this location and tell me where to stand, tell me where to set up my tripod so I can get this shot, and I'm not going to put anybody down for doing that, because oftentimes it's a great shot. It may not, be the best shot that anyone has ever taken, but maybe it doesn't have to be. But you take that shot, and then you see what else you can do there. You see, a different angle, or turn around and see what the light is doing behind you, or go super close up. And it's that variety that sometimes gets lost. On a photo workshop that I attended, there's a woman who, she will sort of dutifully take the big sunset shot, but most of what she does is just like walk around and get a lot of like little tiny details that I'm sure I saw, but I didn't see as a photo opportunity. And you look at her pictures later and you're like, how did I miss that? Or, like the shadow by this one leaf, is amazing. And so having that realization that you can take pictures, even, at like nice, big, well-visited sites, that you can come up with something new is satisfying. But also being able to be in familiar locations, be in your neighborhood, your backyard, your town, where, and then this is something that I struggle with all the time, is how can I make a good photo of this place that I go to every day? Or if you go to the same office every day, how can you make a good original photo either there or on the way home? And there are, literally unlimited possibilities for doing that. But we all get sort of stuck in that mindset of, oh, well, the sky isn't perfect now, so it's not really worth going out. Or
I don't have the right lens.
I don't have the right lens, and I forgot to bring, my tripod, so I shouldn't even bother. And like, we put so many limitations on ourselves that a lot of it just sort of gets wasted away. And what we want to do is inspire people to say, okay, look, go and find something small, or find something happy, as Kirk said, and make something out of it, because there's enjoyment to that. I sound sort of like wishy-washy, squishy, like, ooh, I want to make you feel good. But when you think about it, like photography, at least for me, and I think for a lot of other people, yes, there's a lot of technical aspects to it, but there's also a whole lot of, like, I took this picture of my child because she's not going to be this age for much longer. Or, I went to Hawaii, and yeah, this is a beautiful sunset. It's not the best sunset in the world, but I had the best vacation there, or the best meal, or whatever. Like, there's so many, emotions and experiences that are wrapped up into it. And it's not just, oh, I made a nice picture with good composition and good lighting.
Just to expand a bit, you need to start taking pictures in ways that you don't take pictures. I was looking at a book recently by a German photographer named Bill Brandt, who in the 1920s, 30s, 40s was in England. And there's a section of this book of portraits. And in most of the portraits, the subject is not in the center of the frame. The subject is in the bottom left, in the top right, on the side. So if you're going to take portraits, say to yourself, I will not put the subject in the center of the frame. I will have the subject turn and not look at me. I will take the picture of the person from behind, from below, in backlight, in front light. Just do things that aren't the standard way to do things.
Am I wrong in saying that there's some lessons from videography that can be transferred over to photography? Because that's something that took me a while to learn too, is that you don't, when you're doing video, and I'm not pretending to even know about photography, but when you're doing video, sometimes it can be really interesting to have somebody off to the side a little bit with either something relevant in the background or not, but just it makes it a more interesting shot. And I'm slowly learning some of these things, and I've taken probably more courses on videography than I have on photography, but I think I'm starting to learn that the still image would benefit from some of that same kind of thinking.
Oh yeah,
well,
definitely.
Videography is more documentary, at least what you're doing. But videography is about cinematography, and if you look at a great movie, the way a character is framed, the way a location is framed, I'm trying to think of a recent movie I saw that had really stunning cinematography. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but look at a movie by a great director. If you really want to go for it, look up Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky. It's a movie from the 70s. It's the great existentialist Russian science fiction film. And look at the composition of every single shot. In videography, where you've got to keep a subject on camera, you have a lot more limitations, but you don't have to follow the rules. And there are no rules anyway. There are just things that people have built up. Look at what Picasso did. Look at what Monet did. Look at what anyone did who's a great artist. They broke rules. When you see a photo magazine that tells about the rule of thirds, you should tear those pages out, because that just doesn't exist. You should ignore it.
Okay. Well said. Well said. And listen, guys, we could go on, and I definitely don't want to steal. What I want people to do is listen to this, then go over, subscribe to the podcast, start listening to it, listen to the first episode, and then second episode will follow. But I do want to point out that this is not just a podcast. You have set up a Facebook group, and you're doing all the, not exactly, I don't want to say obligatory things, but the things that I would expect that a photography podcast especially would benefit from. And is there anything that they need to know about the Facebook group, or I guess the Instagram thing will be coming? Any particular concepts there or ideas that you're going to share in those areas?
Yes. Well, it's so
okay. One thing to point out is that this is a photography podcast, so we have to have photographs, and there will be photographs in the show notes on the website. So if you listen to an episode on your iPhone, we really recommend that you go to the website and view the photos that we show. For the first episode, I mentioned there was this photo from my partner's brother that I edited. So we showed the before and after. Jeff talks about an iOS app and shows 3 photos that work with that app with pictures of his daughter. And I'll tell you, he takes a lot of pictures of his daughter. If you follow him on Instagram or Facebook, you'll see lots of pictures. But we intend this to be an integral part of the podcast, that the show notes are quite important. On Facebook, there's a Facebook group that podcast listeners can join once they know the secret word. And we hope to have discussion and share photos and photo challenges, as we said earlier, so we can build a community around this.
Okay, so why do they how do they find out the secret word?
They listen to the whole podcast, and at some point before the end, the secret word will be there. We don't want random people coming into the Facebook group who don't know about the podcast. That's why.
Got it.
And we want people who are going to be interested in collaborating. We don't want somebody who's just going to start throwing bombs like, well, if you don't have a prime lens, then and so this is as much I think for us as for everybody, because we want to communicate with people and find out, okay, like what are you doing with Apple Photos or with your iPhone, and what part of that feeds topics for us, because we want to address the questions that people have, but also just have that space of, okay, we're all here sharing this enthusiasm for this art form, this hobby, and how can we all make that better? Because there are Kirk has this great knowledge of photo history. I have a whole lot of technical background, and those are things that we can provide and share. And other people are going to be able to say, I've been shooting journalistic photos for years, and the different topics and challenges that come up with that. So we really want this to be an interactive, vibrant community. I know that sounds like a cliche, but that's really the best way to do this, because we're not just here to tell you, all right, go shoot something and come back and report. Because even though I've been shooting as a photographer for 12 years or something, I've had stuff published. I've appeared in a gallery, but we are not the end all be all of this, and as you will discover, and as Chuck, photography is so broad, and there are so many different areas that you can get into, that's the exciting part.
Agreed.
And you can take cat photos.
And cat photos. Yes.
Cat photos. That's important,
which
for
is
some
basically
people.
What runs the internet. So
yeah, well, that's
I think Kirk is basically. Let's break this down. Kirk came to me and said, "Let's do a photo podcast that we can talk about photos and post photos." What he really said was, "I have a lot of cat photos, and I want to share them with the world, and this is how I'm going to do it." And
yes. Yes,
perfect.
I have 2 very attractive cats, and they're quite photogenic. And you get them in all different angles and different sunlight and all
lighting.
that, and it's
yeah.
And well, to be fair, many people like to take photos of their pets. I'm in a Facebook group for Fujifilm camera users and pet owners who post photos of their pets that they've taken with Fujifilm cameras. And people like this because pets are good subjects. They're attractive. They're interesting. Dogs are better than cats because you can get them to do things. But pets are interesting subjects. Children are interesting subjects. A garden is interesting subjects. I live in a house. It's an old farmhouse, and in the back there's a garden about 1/3 of an acre, and my partner has been building up this garden, and there is this extraordinary profusion of flowers. It was the lilacs a couple weeks ago. The wisteria is blooming. There's lupins outside. There's roses. And last year I bought a macro lens to start taking macro shots of flowers. This is really close up and sometimes closer than just the whole, like the details of the flower. And this is fascinating. You know, Georgia O'Keeffe's painting. Well, a macro photo of a flower can be as interesting as that. So you can shoot anything. You don't have to go to take a picture of the Taj Mahal or the Alps or Mount Everest or whatever. There's things all over the place to shoot. And again, on the Facebook group, I think we both want to learn from other people too. You know, we're not great photographers. We know what we're doing. We know how to manipulate files and all that. And we've got a particular vision, but there's tons of people who are good photographers. So, you know, we hope it's a give and take.
I think it will be. I think just because, if nothing else, the two of you already have a built-in fan base. And so they're going to want to see what you're up to. And I think that fan base will want to contribute. I know I'm not sure about contributing because I've got no kids, I've got no cat, and I've got no garden. But you know,
okay, I'm gonna give you a project to do.
Oh boy,
with your iPhone. No, with your iPhone, I want you to go out and take pictures of people teeing off at the golf course because I know you play golf. But find a way to take pictures that you're not just focusing on the person teeing off. Find a way to get that person in the frame and something else in the frame. You do this with your iPhone. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just think about it. When you're looking at people on the golf course, think, what's going on around them? Maybe someone's teeing off and two people on the other side are telling a joke and laughing. Or there's a golf cart over there, and you get the guy teeing off just as he's swinging, and you get half the golf cart. Or there's a squirrel running by. I don't know. Find some way to take a picture of people teeing off that's not about the people teeing off.
All right, I'll work on that.
Turn on the live mode on your iPhone. I can't remember what it's called now. I should know it off the top of my head, but where it records like 5 seconds or something.
Right.
And take a picture of somebody teeing off, and then set that to long exposure. See what happens.
That's an interesting idea. Okay.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that in an episode soon. Live pictures. Yeah. They're an interesting technology.
Yeah. Okay, so these are the kind of things that you're going to get, folks, if you come and listen to this. And I know I'll be listening, and now I've got homework. I didn't expect that.
Come for the cat photos. Stay for Chuck's golf photos.
Yeah.
It's only homework if you want. You know, if you want to do more photography and learn more about photography, you need to take pictures. And it's cheap, and you don't need to send them off to get them processed.
Yeah.
You got your phone, you sync them to your Mac, you look at them in Photos. We're going to tell you a trick. When you go into Photos, you select a photo, you press the return button, and you go into edit mode, okay? There's a little button on the top with a magic wand and like sparks on it. And both Jeff and I use this often. It's like the automatic AI fix the picture thing. And it's not always good, but it's very often good or gets you close to an improvement on a photo you've made in terms of lighting and contrast and exposure and all that. So try that as well. That's an easy tip that anyone can do without having to worry about all the little sliders and the graphs and everything.
Sounds good. So of course, first of all, the podcast is available now on iTunes. And I know at least in 2 podcatchers, because I checked out 2 podcatchers that I have. But the website where people can go to see the pictures you're talking about and also get links to everything else, that website is?
Photoactive.co.
.co.
Photoactive.co. We could not afford the M.
Got it. Well, guys, thank you.
It was $7,500 for photoactive.com. It was $26 for photoactive.co.
I see. Budgetary considerations. Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing some of this. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say as we go forward. Probably trying a few things out. And I'm going to enjoy my homework. It may take me a little while to come up with some right ideas, but I guess this is all part of starting to learn to think like a photographer. So,
yep, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Good. Jeff, where else can they find you on social media outside of Photo Focus?
PhotoActive.
PhotoActive, sorry.
That's okay. So you can find me at jeffcarlson.com. And actually, I've been around early enough that my Instagram is also at Jeff Carlson and my Twitter is at Jeff Carlson. And Facebook, because I don't know why, and Facebook /Jeff L. Carlson. But, you can search for me or just go to jeffcarlson.com. That's a good start.
Great to have you here. Kirk, how about you? Where can folks find you? I know you have one or two projects going.
My website is kirkville.com. I have a new photo website at photos.kirkville.com. And on Twitter and Instagram, I am McElhearn, McElhearn.
Perfect. Gentlemen, once again, thanks so much. We'll be hearing from you again, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Okay, I came away from this one with a little work to do, but I think I'm going to enjoy it. I really am. I'm hoping to improve my photography, whether I'll share it with you or not, but I can assure you, no cats. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our MacVoices Facebook group and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us at patreon.com/MacVoices and join these folks who help keep MacVoices coming to you. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.